What got you interested in entrepreneurship? So what sort of set you off on this journey early on?
Ooh, entrepreneurship for me is something that started a long, long time ago. I mean, my father, he ran our family business back in Germany, fifth
Hmm.
generation family business. So, and my mother was a kind of self-employed physiotherapist. I don't really know anything different. I was actually more of an outlier when I started after university to take a job and not do something myself right out of the gate. So this has always been my ambition to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah, Florian, just because I'd love to hear more about your background, right? Because you're now doing a deep tech startup, what a lot of people consider kind of like a high tech, deep tech
Mhm.
company. But your background, you actually started a property business, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Every Stay?
Yeah, that's
So I'd love to hear kind of the story that maybe took you from, what you studied up until founding Every Stay, and then why you then went on to Money Machines.
yeah, sure. So the studies that I chose was business. Like I think in German this is called a Diplom-Kaufmann. It's essentially a master of business administration or a master of science in economics and business. I picked that university. It's called the WHU Otto Weisheim School of Management because it had very strong entrepreneurial track record at that time, more from an industry point of view. And as I was going through my studies, this whole Germany rocket internet thing kicked off through the alumni or through the students of that university. So I was kind of at the center of the what you now have in this kind of Berlin-based startup mafia. So these are all people that went with me to university or a couple of years earlier, a couple of years after. And when I started, you graduate and become a consultant or a banker. That was the standard thing. And with us, it was kind of the first two or three classes that really went to do startup first. I graduated in 2008, which was a tricky year for doing a startup. I had with a couple of friends from uni, we had everything lined up, a business, even went to the US for business plan competitions. And then first Bear Stearns went under, and then Lehman went, wasn't quite, Lehman hadn't quite started wobbling yet, but we kind of realized that doing a funding round in kind of July, August 2008 was not going to happen. So we all took our plan B. One guy went to work for the Zamber brothers directly. The next guy went to BCG, and I started work at Google to just kind of have something to do. And then when I started at Google, I started seeing the woman who's now my wife, and she started at Lehman Brothers. So I kind of was very close to this whole fallout, and it was a good decision not to bet on entrepreneurship in 2008. But I then spent probably 5 years trying to claw back from that. Right, because I when someone asked me when is a good time to start a business, I would still always say right out of uni, because first you start a job, you get used to a slightly different lifestyle, you have other commitments. Some people want to get married. You put it off, delay. And for me, when I finally I tried a few times to do some sort of a spin-off out of jobs that I had along the way, but it never really quite happened. Some issues with finding a co-founder or finding good traction initially with a business model.
So Florian, when you say that you tried to do a spin-off, Were you sort of looking to start businesses in the industry that you're working and like come up with something in that industry and say, okay, I think we could optimize this?
So there was one company I was working for when I came to London, and it was called Sigma Response. That was a direct marketing company, and they said they had very good experience in advertising a product on TV and Google AdWords. So I was running the whole online thing, and I kind of graduated from just doing Google AdWords to doing all sorts of online marketing.
Yeah.
And we thought we could spin out with that platform. We could spin out a different product that was supposed to be a kind of calorie controlled diet box. So you have a subscription for basically ordering a box with all your essential food items and lose a lot of weight while just eating what's in the box. So we did a big roadshow. We pitched to Index, Excel, all of these. Learned a lot. Learned a lot there. Basically, it was too boring of a business. It wasn't deep tech enough, right? They said this is an execution business. It's basically, I can clearly see your KPIs. I can give you 100,000 or so to get you started, but I need to see some traction. And we had the platform, we had money from the business and all the contacts. We were going for let's raise a couple of million and make this really big from the start.
Okay. But how did that did that affect you at all on a personal basis, where you had this expectation, right? This is what we want to do with this business, and you kind of go into these people that can make that happen, but they kind of come back to you and say, "Hey, this isn't as interesting as you think it is. Try to prove it first."
Affect me personally? Well, of course, you're disappointed. I mean, the co-founder I was working with at the time, he pulled the ripcord and went back to his investment banking job. Said, "Oh, I'm much better off here." And I stayed in the company for a little while, but I also then decided that it was time to move on, because I had been with that startup for long enough. The spin-off was an attempt to get it to more interesting. And then I went to Glossybox in Berlin. Again, subscription e-commerce was relevant, and they had a lot of need to kind of structure their online marketing team. It's quite a big corporate job. I mean, it was a startup, but I had a pretty big team. Was working with like local marketing directors in 20 markets. It was a very interesting business that had raised massive amounts of money, rocket internet, high pressure growth environment. Learned a lot there on what to do with company culture, what not to do with company culture.
Do you want to shed some insights there? What to do and what not to do in company culture?
I think the you have a so what Glossybox I think did very well. They had a pair of founders, boyfriend girlfriend, that had done extremely well at building a initial MVP, recruiting I think something like 10 people to get these beauty box subscriptions going in Germany. And there was a really cohesive team. They all knew what they were doing. They were packing the boxes together. They were celebrating success together. And then they got really pushed by Rocket to make this really big and turn this into an international business. And this kind of high focus from a very, very ambitious investor to grow very, very fast. And then I think half a year later, when I joined, we found, okay, so here's 20 markets. There is in every market, there is a team of 5 or 6 people where everybody's called founder and CEO and chief marketing officer and what have you. And they weren't able to transport this Berlin-based culture for the German market they had built into all the other local markets, and kind of try to play catch up while we were still growing. And it really, it's very hard, I think, to take a very, very good brand and good culture global within a matter of a few months. Yeah, but that was kind of what was required from the investors, because they were competing with Birchbox in the US, right? It's again, there are a lot of questions about what's this Rocket Internet model and the copycatting and all that. But at that time, that was 2011, that was the dream they were chasing, right? They had copied Shoe Dazzle with or what was it called, the Zappos. They had a Zappos clone, they had a Groupon clone, they had all of these things where execution was the only thing that really was going to establish or justify all the money that had been put in. And I mean, I think looking back, hardly any of these businesses is sustainable now, right? You see the fast delivery companies also collapsing one after another. The scooter startups had the same kind of land grabs. And for me personally, I think maybe not immediately after Glossybox, but I realized that for me, these businesses where execution is absolutely everything and the technology is almost secondary, that wasn't that interesting to me, or not anymore. I think this is something that was very suitable to early 20s people that can throw 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at their startup. But now, where I am now, right, our machines are not going to work better just because we do crazy hours, right? If you do the same thing over and over, if it's poorly designed, it's still not going to work. But if you have a market land grab, if you call another 100 customers and another 100 customers, yes, you are going to somehow grow. Question is, how long they're going to stay with you?
So then I think from that tale, it's very, very insightful actually, because I think a lot of people would immediately say, all right, software is the answer. Let me try and build a software product because that's very scalable. That doesn't require, kind of loads of hours of time. So that for me, maybe the inverted commas safer option would be to go to software. So I'm very interested to hear, why did you go after such a big challenging problem, one that requires, huge capex and, building physical products? What was it about that appealed to you? Was it kind of the problem set? Was it, a passion for helping farmers via money machines, or what was it? What was that trigger?
So also compared to what I've done with Everystay, the appeal was, okay, so let's fast forward 20 years. What would I be happy with? Legacy is a big word, or what's on your tombstone, but essentially when I have 3 kids now, the first one came along, or I kind of started Everystay when the first one was just kind of 6 months old. And you start thinking about, so what do you tell them one day? What did you do? Right. And Everystay was a wonderful experience in terms of learning how to build a company myself and getting to make a lot of mistakes, which I've made plenty. I spoke about what we did and didn't do right at Glossybox, but not sure I did better at Everystay. But I say, okay, so what do I explain? What do I tell them when they're old enough to understand what does daddy do, right? And on the example of Everystay would be, okay, so we help people that own holiday houses to make more money by doing it a little bit differently, right? So we make people that are already well off a lot better off. And that doesn't really sound as great. And so I asked myself, so how can I do something that is really impactful, that is something where I can be proud of, that we helped fix one of the larger problems of our time. And I realized that as a business guy, there is very little I can do there on my own with just kind of hiring some software people and building a software. I think this kind of innovation through software only, that is very 2008 to 15 maybe, and this time is kind of done, right? And so we have in my family-in-law, they're Portuguese, and they took over a farming business about 10 years ago. This was time when in Portugal there was a big recession, land was very cheap, so there was this plot, nearly 1,000 hectares, so quite big, that came on the market for nearly nothing, right? It was completely run down. it was a cattle meat production business and a bit of olive production. Trees were cut down, all the water reservoirs were depleted, the cows were malnourished, the herd was very small. And so I saw them slowly building this back up with investment timeframes of like, yeah, okay, we buy this irrigation system, it might pay back in 20 years or so. And so this kind of long-term horizon, watching that, and this ambition to say, okay, what can we do in terms of that's something that's really impactful, kind of led me to this attempt to say, what can I do in agriculture? Is there anything technology-wise that we can bring to agriculture to make that better? That was before even understanding that there were problems. I just kind of saw how, with what simple measures, my family-in-law managed to turn this ruined business into something that is sustainable now, economically sustainable. And now only we're coming into this point, okay, what can we do on a regenerative, can we do organic? Like this is now the time where they can start thinking about that, which is super exciting. But as a founder, those were kind of the touch points. And I knew I couldn't just build an app and tell farmers how to run their business better, right? That was too much, I would probably be chased off farm if I came along with that. So when I met my co-founder, Chris, at Entrepreneurs First, and he said, okay, I can build robots. And I also think there is something with technology that we can do that should be doable in farming. We went on, this full 360 journey of speaking to all types of different farmers. We spoke to the meat industry. I mean, there's a lot of challenges around abattoirs, labor shortages there, about humane slaughter, or in the shooting the animals in field and not transporting them. There's that. There's a lot of stuff in poultry. There's a lot of stuff in dairy. And of course, most ag-tech businesses so far that have reached scale, they were in this whole broad acre field crop area where you have high fertilizer prices, where you have soil degradation and all that. And so we thought this is a path that has already been widely trodden. And the people that we spoke to that were the most anxious, but also the most underserved, were the growers of specialty row crops, field vegetables, and soft fruits that told us about their labor shortages. And then when you hear, okay, here's a labor shortage for a task that requires humans, because you need to understand with your brain and with your eye, what can I pick, what can I not pick, and have to have manual dexterity in the process of picking it so that you don't destroy the plant, so they can give you more fruit the next day. And you have a robotics person in your team that looked like something that matches, that in principle there is a problem that you could look at solving.
So that's very interesting. So how did you go about solving that? Because obviously, as you said, an app is obviously way too simple a solution, right? But the benefit of software is that you can roll it out, in the space of a week or a weekend. So how did you because obviously, there'd be a long time for you to design these robots, build them, scale them up, manufacture all of that. So how did you propose your solution to these farmers' problems initially? Did you say, all right, we're building a robot that could potentially help solve your problem? Did you have some kind of prototype, or did you not start building until you had validated that farmers would actually want this?
Also, if I can add to that, probably ask extremely similar question, but from a different angle. Did the aspect of immense amount of capex deter you at the beginning? Whenever your co-founder in EF, probably you guys met in a more informal setting, right? And he said, "Oh, I can build robots." And did you guys sit down and think maybe there's going to be too much capital expenditure if we go about this process, as James was just alluding to there?
This is something that we got challenged a lot on at EF. Yeah, I mean they are. I mean, they do great work, but I think they're a lot more comfortable in non-hardware intensive businesses, specifically SaaS. So yes, we had to overcome that. I mean, for Chris, he's a robotics engineer, right? So there isn't really that's what it takes to build robots, right? It's from my point of view, I had after spending some time at SumUp, which is a payment provider that built their own hardware. I had kind of sworn to myself never to do hardware again, because I saw firsthand how long it can take to build, even if it's just a handheld payment device, but then you have to get it regulatory approved, and it was a long journey for them. I kind of broke that promise to myself getting into Muddy Machines, just because I saw the immense amount of customer pull. So that's what really convinced me that this is something worth doing. People think that when you speak to farmers, you're speaking to these small businesses where there's a dude sitting on a tractor and there's like 1 or 2 chickens and a cow, and then he has his fields. That's not how modern agriculture works, right? These are businesses with hundreds or even thousands of employees at peak season. They spend
huge amounts of land as well, right?
Huge amount of land, either directly owned or under management. I mean, in specialty crops, the hectare sizes are a lot smaller than like in soy or corn or wheat, but the revenue per hectare is a lot higher, right? And
Florian, just to give our listener base an idea, because agriculture is not an industry that I'm familiar with whatsoever. So like an average customer for Muddy Machines, how much revenue would they be turning over in a year?
So I give you this example. So one field worker for a season of, let's say, asparagus harvest costs the farmer something like £7,000 in hourly rates. So if you build a robot that can build that can replace 3 people, 4 people, you're in this kind of £20,000 per robot revenue in the season. Now,
per hour?
In the season.
Okay.
Revenue for the season. I mean, we can get into why we chose asparagus in a minute as well, but the point is that a farmer who has a small production where he can basically harvest with 2 or 3 people or do it himself with his family, that's not the kind of client that we're going for, right? We're aiming for operations that need 100 or even, and our key customer here in the UK, they need 1,000 people a year to do their harvest, right? So they spend almost 100,000 a day on labor in the season. So that gives you an idea that our kind of core customer target, if you look at it from a B2B business point of view, those are accounts that have at least 500,000, if not 6 million a year in recurring revenues to grow that account, right? I mean, growing an account means we first provide them with a small number of robots to kind of prove the concept on their land and their field that it works operationally for them. And then the situation is that they only get about half the labor that they need at present, right? So you can backfill their labor gap to a point where you're easily making several millions per season in harvest service revenue with them. And then only do you come to this point where you're beginning to replace labor with robots, like labor that they would actually be able to get otherwise. And we'll see. The labor trend is, I mean, it's very problematic for farmers, but they see less and less labor availability every year. They are getting hit by minimum hourly wage increases, not only in the UK. So the cost of production is rising for them. And we are, I think, not unreasonable to expect that our bill of materials is going to drop as we build more and more robots. So today's alternative is going up and up and up in price, and our technology solution is over time going down in price. So we want to be competitive from the get-go versus European, North American, or British labor, but there are very large producer markets in Latin America that obviously have lower labor costs, but I think over time we can also be competitive there. And for asparagus, this is Peru and Mexico. I mean, they grow several multiples of the hectares that you have in Europe. It's staggering.
Floyd, where are your target markets at the moment? Because it sounds like, so you said asparagus, And also you're looking at customers that have quite a lot of land, doing up to 6 million recurring revenue a year. So are you finding that the majority of those are in the UK? I'd imagine not, right? Because the UK doesn't have huge farms the same way North America does. Might have a few, but
yeah, I mean, the huge farms in North America, those are again monocrops, soy, corn, cereals, etc. Mostly, right? The vegetable producing operations are also nowhere near as big. I mean, what you're thinking about is the big corn belt operations. They also have issues with getting labor there, right? They couldn't grow vegetables even if they wanted, because they couldn't get the people all the way into the middle of nowhere. So target markets. I think as a hardware company, in order to raise money for your expansion, I think you need to show a clear path to profitability after your Series A, right? So our base case is to focus on the UK, which, yes, it is a very small market compared to the rest of the world, but really reach, like, find a very easy to understand projection of reaching profitability here, but then having the option to, with more investment injection, to start going international quicker. Our first market after the UK is probably Canada and North United States. There's a grower region in Ontario and Michigan. That's like they're two states next to each other, just across the border. And that would be my first place to expand. We've been invited to do field demos there, etc., etc. So there is a very, very strong pull from the customers, the Peruvians and Mexicans. We've actually been to Peru in October and done some field tests. The interest is there. We just need to kind of save our bullets and say, okay, is it smart to go international first before you've even deployed more than 10 robots in one place, right? You have
it's quite common advice across a lot of industries, right? It's like, prove out your unit economics in a small area, show that this is a viable business, and don't kind of do your outreach and your geographical expansion before you're ready.
So we have all the contacts, right? But I'm very wary of setting up service infrastructure, etc. Before I know I can actually earn money with just a handful of locations here in the UK. But one thing just I wanted to point out really quickly before we get too much into asparagus, right? The asparagus is just our, if you want to word it this way, the first killer app, right? Our robot Sprout is a tool carrier platform that can work in a variety of these specialty crops. And we are aiming to, yes, build our own implements like the asparagus harvester, but very soon also work with other robotic startups that have built a solution that works either for picking or for weeding or for monitoring or for soil sampling, anything like that, but they're lacking a drivetrain. And so that's what we really want to bring to this whole AgTech robotics industry, is I think there's probably room for several, but like be one of the main platforms where these labor replacing implements run on.
The question I have for you, Florian, is why not Germany? Because I'm just looking at the list of the top countries that produce asparagus. So for your beachhead market of asparagus.
Yeah, you're looking at the FAO data, or what are you looking at?
FAO, that's right, yeah, 2020.
Yeah, the FAO, that's an interesting one because they don't split between green and white asparagus. So you need to, again, speak to the farmers themselves and to the industry to understand, these are the tonnages, the hectares, the production values reported by the countries. If you look at the FAO data, your first market should be China, because for some reason they are
86%.
They are claiming that they are producing, and this is something I don't want to put myself on record with saying, but the industry views it this way, right? So Peru and Mexico are the largest growers. China claims to be 20 times larger than the top 10 other countries combined. Is it likely that China is big? Yes, probably. Are they as big as Mexico and Peru combined? Maybe. Are they 20 times bigger? Probably not. But anyhow, we without getting ahead of myself, market choice, right? So Germany, yes, comes up as a top producer, but it's mostly white asparagus. As I mentioned, we want to build a platform that we use a couple of crops to kind of kickstart that and demonstrate the usability. White asparagus is a crop that is mainly grown for the German market. So the Germans grow that themselves, and they have some Greek producers, some Spanish producers that kind of feed into that market. But white asparagus isn't really consumed much outside of Germany, France, Netherlands, of course. And so it's estimated to be only like 30% or 20% of the global production. So the question really is, where are your green markets? And also, what is the transferable robotics skill? So white asparagus is very specific. It grows under the ground, so you have to kind of dig it up. That makes it very labor intensive. But the green asparagus is the same plant. It's just that you let it grow through to the surface and then harvest it at ground level. So spotting something with a computer vision camera, understanding what it is, understanding whether it's ripe, and then cutting it off at ground level, for us was a very transferable skill to develop, to then deploy into other crops, like above ground, recognizing it, cutting it off. Yeah, that could be an artichoke, that could be a broccoli, that could be a cauliflower, that could be, in a slightly different angle, could be a courgette. But if you have built a white asparagus skill where you detect something underground, dig it out, etc., where is that transferable to? That was our question. And we couldn't find an answer. And so there were two companies that did white asparagus robotics. One has now already gone under. The other one seems to be doing better, but I think they will stay with white asparagus. They will not expand to other crops. And for us, that is integral to our strategy to be a really big, meaningful company to say, yeah, we can deploy our robot into the asparagus field with the asparagus implement in the early season from April to July. And then something like a courgette that grows from July all the way to November, right? They've only recently stopped harvesting. And then you can utilize the hardware that you've built, not 3 months of the year, but 6 months of the year, right? And most agricultural machines, especially in the harvest space, like a combine harvester, costs you $1 million, and you use it for like a week. And then it stays in the shed because you're done with your harvest, and everybody else is also done harvesting because that is the week where in that part of the world, the wheat was ready to go. And we have very strong views on sustainability and impact, and we didn't want to build a machine that would be, again, like that. A lot of hardware, a lot of tech in there, use it for a short period, and then put it in the shed. Commercially, you can obviously still make that work. People buy combine harvesters, but for solving the labor problem, people are versatile, right? The asparagus harvesters, when they're done with the picking season for asparagus, they transition to something else. They transition to blueberries, to rhubarb, to some other crops that they're also needed for. And if you're building a robotic solution, you need to also be versatile.
I think, yeah, there's actually great lessons in there for any listeners and founders as well. It's like, not just in agriculture or the hard tech space, but try and pick, a beachhead market that then has future potential to be expanded out into. Don't pick something that's going to really silo you off. If you build a product that's for a very, very certain subset of people that actually has no potential to expand, instead try and pick something where you can actually project, 5-10 years out, a much wider amount of people is going to use this.
And you asked me about the challenges from early on, right? So not only EF, but also other accelerator programs where we were accepted in, they challenged us very strongly on this. Really, do you want to build the drivetrain, the software, the computer vision, and the end effector yourself? Why don't you focus on one thing? And we had such strong conviction that yes, we need to do that, because if you just build an end effector, well, then you have an end effector, but no product, right? Then there are some companies that have then mounted a basically car manufacturing robot, costs a lot of money, such an arm, 50,000 pounds, on a tractor, and they go take it through the field, and of course they can pick stuff. But at what cost, right? That's never going to be competitive with a human worker, in my view. So we said, no, we cannot just buy an off-the-shelf drivetrain, because the autonomous, battery-powered, small robotic vehicles that you could buy they come from the defense industry or from nuclear power plant cleaning, where you spend 100, 200,000 on a robot. And I told you how much a field worker costs, right? They're completely out of whack with the unit economics of farming. So we said, no, we have to innovate. We're not the first people to get a robot to drive, right? But we're probably one of the first ones to get it to do that at the cost that actually works for growers. And another thing that I think listeners probably don't know, when you in farming, soil compaction is a real issue. If you drive over the soil with something heavy like a tractor, you compact it. So think about it like a sponge, right? If a sponge is fluffy, you can pour water on it and it will hold that water. If the sponge is already squeezed, you pour water on it, it runs right through. And so the water in farming, it is also water, but it's also nutrients. So if you have a compacted soil, you have a terrible yield. You can dope it for a while with fertilizers, but it is essentially not going to give you the return that you're looking for. So they need to really watch out what drives over their crop. And in vegetable farming, you need to harvest almost every day. So if we're designing a machine that is very, very big and very, very heavy, because designing it is so expensive, we need to have a massive throughput. We need to replace, let's say, 50 people, 100 people with one machine. Then we're actually building something that will destroy the land. So that's why we need to stay small and light with the robots, and can only think in the replacing 3, maybe 5 people dimension, because otherwise you get too heavy. And this kind of sets up your the borders of your design choices. And you need to stay modular, and you need to stay like at a certain price. But that's an exciting challenge, right? We have very, very good people on board now that understand that challenge. And for engineers, this is great, right? If you have clear goals of what you need to achieve, what you can innovate on the way to building that product.
Florian, is these challenges you just mentioned, how did you first realize there were challenges? Was it by hiring people, as you just said, that were experienced in the space, like obsessively educating yourself in the farming market once you decided to go in? So I imagine you didn't know this stuff when you were working on it. Right?
I think as a founder, you need to obsessively educate yourself first, right? And this is probably one of the biggest values of Entrepreneur First, right? Because they kept on pushing us into that, like, validate this, create an assumption, validate it, find someone who will validate it, who is telling you, right? And because we were lucky to run into an industry that was extremely desperate for a solution, we got a lot of airtime from these farmers. So before long, we still have calls with him every week almost. He's like the largest asparagus grower in the UK. He grows almost half of the production here. He has a pack house where 12 other growers pack their asparagus, and that's almost 80% of the total market. So if someone like that tells you, A, there is no other solution out there, B, I'm really going to support you in figuring out from a crop science point of view what you need to do, what is acceptable as a solution and what isn't. Soil compaction was one. It doesn't have to be cheaper than labor, but it can't be completely out of whack. Otherwise, losing crop because I have no workers is bad, but spending 10 times as much to harvest that crop also doesn't work, right? So that's one other border that he gave us. And then how do you harvest it? Where do you have to cut it off? How do you have to train your algorithm in order for it to pick only the crop that is now ripe. You can only get that through educating yourself, talking to your customers, and bringing them on board. He's not an investor, but the amount of time invested by him and his company in us is really a key enabler for where we are now. Right? We can any day we have a permanent porter cabin office on one of his farms, which is probably again one of the largest asparagus plots, connected asparagus plots in the UK. We have access to power, internet, and a big shed where we can house our prototypes, where we can take them out into the field. Even on days like today, we can do some tests and driving in the snow or in the mud. That is extremely valuable for us.
So it sounds like the perfect focus group.
Focus group, customer champion. If you want to look at it from a B2B sales point of view, this business is an owner-managed business. So you have very quick decisions. We have investment from another company, Barfords of Botley. They are much bigger, not in asparagus, but overall they import crops, etc. They are amazing to work with, but of course, there is a board there that needs to kind of approve decisions, and there are a lot more protocols to follow. So I think if you as a founder have the choice, who is my lead customer, if you have someone on the other side that has a lot of agency, it doesn't necessarily have to be an owner manager, but someone who can really, if you convince that person can make a decision. That is going to save you a lot of time and disappointment.
Mm-hmm. It's like when they talk about, you can make a cold call or a cold email, but you want to make sure you're in front of the decision maker before you actually start selling, or else you could be wasting.
The decision maker and also decision maker and expert combined almost.
That's
right.
Perfect.
It is hard to replicate in big B2B, right? Because your counterparts they tend to be corporates, right?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to say, Florian, that you had to you're always in this state of re-educating yourself. Yeah. And I wanna come from the angle of how does that feel? Because you've obviously spent decades, you started in kind of more marketing roles, you worked at startups, you founded companies, you've learned about the property market, and now you're learning about agriculture, and all of these things, they seem quite disparate. I'd love to hear your take on whether you think they are disparate or they're all interlinked, and kind of what lessons have you taken forward from all your past experiences into this new one?
I never really sat down and thought about that. I think as you're going through your founder journey on a venture, previous experience kind of give you certain deja vu moments. And that's why you have your learning experience. So if an employee comes to you and asks a question about, what about my career development, or I have something going on at home I need to deal with, having the experience of not being confronted with that for the first time, right? It really helps you to handle that well, or to actually know, we have a policy in place for that already. Take your compassionate leave and there you go. But there are so many examples also on I've done a lot of online marketing, and online marketing for our business right now is almost irrelevant, right? I'm not going to run a TikTok campaign and convert farmers to sign up to buy robots or to contract robot services. So it is not. Our marketing, we don't need performance marketing. If anything, we need person-to-person sales once we have that scale and wonder where to put our robots. Right now, I know all the customers already, and we don't really have a distribution risk. But knowing that this is how online marketing works and deciding that you don't have to bother, that also saves us time and headache. Right? If some investors like to do that as well. Why don't you have more of a social media presence? We do post sometimes, but it is more of a we know that we need to speak to investors online. We know that we need to speak to potential employees online. So that's what we're building our online presence for. The farmers, I mean, come to my farm with your robot and show me what you can do, right? Your video is nice, but show me, right? That's what works. And when you can
I like that video as well that you had at the event where we met. We met about a month ago, right? To any listeners, at a deep tech event in London, and I approached your stand because I saw you had what no one else had. Like, you had a physical prototype, like, if I'm not correct, probably like a half scale down or a quarter scale down version of the bot
of this thing here. I don't
Love
know.
it. There we go. Wow, I did actually. That's crazy because I didn't even realize it was that big. Because I'd only seen the scaled down version. That's very big. But you had like a little video that walked it through, kind of showed me in 2 minutes everything I needed to know about how it worked. Yeah, fantastic.
I'm sure we can kind of post this on the show notes. And
absolutely.
Again, right. It is a very fortunate situation that we have something that is so easy to understand, right? This is very clear what we're doing. Of course, there's a lot more magic behind that, and the expansion option, cross crop functionality, etc. that requires a bit more explanation. But in principle, if someone meets Muddy Machines and I say, yeah, we are the robotic harvesting company, that sticks. But I think when you come back to how have the past experiences helped, I think the biggest learnings is how to not do something, right? And what do you have to always prioritize as a founder, like what do you do first, what do you do now, because you have limited time. And for Muddy Machines, Chris and I, we took the time several days very early on to actively think about our values, what kind of culture do we want to build. That is the thing that I find gets quite easily overlooked when you're in the trenches, building, or selling. But this is kind of the thing that you need to fall back on as you grow from 2 people to 5 people to 10 people to 20 people. If you only start thinking about that when you have 20, 30 people, it's a bit late. It's no longer coming from you as a founder, right? It's something that you then quickly have to whip up, just like everything. Oh, here's another prototype. Make some slides on culture and let's go, right? And we said, no, we want to be farmer focused. So this is at the core of our values. We want to build technology that has very, very high quality. We want to have people here that are absolutely relentless at solving problems, but we want them also to be very healthy, like healthy for the planet and healthy for themselves. And that is something that keeps on coming up when you think of, okay, what choice do we make on this kind of policy, this kind of work schedule, or even the lunch choices for the team sometimes. And the last thing, or I mean, these are not in any particular order, but the other thing that is very, very important to us is that when we hire people, they show ownership the same way that we as founders show ownership to the business. You know, tidy up your desk, don't leave it a mess, but also do stuff that really matters, right? And I think this way, if you get the mix of that right, I think you have a culture where people really have agency, skill, and impact in what they're doing. And at the end of the day, maybe this is a learning from employments that I've been in, right? You sometimes you realize what I'm doing here doesn't, if I don't show up tomorrow, it doesn't really matter. You asked about learning, right? If you say, okay, they've trained me and now they expect me to kind of give them an ROI on the training that they've given me for the next couple of years. Make so and so many more sales calls, close this account, do this, do that, write the emails a little bit prettier. I think for me, when you plateau on your learning like that, that's when I always started to look around for something else. So again, how do you get people to stick around with you in the company? You need to give them a similar kind of experience of know what you're doing matters, feel that you're learning, and also feel that you're appreciated. And it's hard to scale that, right? On a one-on-one basis, yes, you can. How many people can you take for lunch every day of the week and tell them that they matter? You need to instill this as a feeling in the company where it's not only the founders live that, but everybody else and the people that report into them also live this kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, man, I think what you're saying is super, super instructive, especially for early stage founders looking to kind of not just start a business, but sculpt the vision behind their business. Because what you're kind of getting at is build a mission statement, build your core values.
I mean, it sounds so fluffy, right? It sounds this is so like consultant speak, etc. But sit down with a couple of post-it notes, whether it's one value or 5 or 3. It is also a very good exercise if you have a co-founder, right? In every stay, I was a single founder. I didn't bother with that. Like, I know what kind of business I want to build. And I then realized that people were completely directionless after a while. It's like, what do you want from me? Of course, we just need to make the business a success. The success is it's a marketplace. How many houses do we have? How many guests do we have? That's self-explanatory. No, what's the vision? Jesus, leave me alone. Now I realize how important that is. You need to answer that question. So what's our vision? No, we want to sustainably solve agriculture's labor challenges with robots.
Did you learn that the hard way?
It is funny how you that people, or it's something that you need to realize as a founder, that people don't know that when they engage with your business as an employee or anyhow, you need to state that proactively.
I think a lot of people just see it as a job, right? And it's a trend that I've definitely heard, which is the CEO is ultimately like, they've started a business because they are very invested in their vision. And I've heard from kind of people that are, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line in their journey, that it becomes so integral to your identity that you can't even separate yourself from your business, right? And
I think you need to start a business where this is okay with you, right? If you start a business that is insanely profitable, but actually what you're doing, you don't really want to tell people about, you don't want that advertised, it's going to chip away at you.
They say a lot of the time, like, the co-founder is the first sell, right? If you can sell one other person on your vision, and they get as on board with it as you are, then
develop the vision together, right? I didn't come to Chris with, here I want to sustainably solve agriculture's labor challenges. No, right? It's like, I really think that there is something to be done in agriculture with technology. I don't know what. And he was like, yeah, that's intriguing. I think so too. Right? That was the initial common denominator.
Right, that's really interesting. Thanks a lot, Florian, for your time. No, it's been a really insightful conversation. I'm sorry, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't actually. Thank you, Florian. Really appreciate that. I think I've learned quite a lot about the asparagus industry, and I imagine that at Muddy Machines company lunch is just 10 plates of asparagus for everybody.
I don't want to imagine the smell in the bathrooms.
Yeah, I mean, our farmer John could give you a long presentation on the kind of smell bit on asparagus and how it affects some people and not others. But of course, we do eat a lot of asparagus, especially in season. We put them on the barbecue at the farm. Nice. I can highly recommend that. And yeah, I mean, watch this space, right? We're building now our first small fleet to deploy in April time. So we're going to have 5 sprouts in the field doing commercial asparagus harvesting. So we're currently doing a team rota who's going to be basically full-time in the field supervising the robots, including bank holidays. It's going to be an exciting season for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, really interested to keep up with where it's going, and the agriculture space in general. I think you've inspired both of us to actually learn more and dig deeper in that. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, and all the best for everything.
Thank you for the time.
Take care of yourself, Florian. All the best.
Bye.